Hi, my name is Piotr and welcome to Cloud Native Corner, where I focus on practical exploration on various cloud native projects. Today we are going to talk about Kluctl. What is Kluctl? It's a tool that helps managing Kubernetes deployments in a consistent way using YAML templating. You might ask yourself, why do we need one more Helm or one more Kustomize? It's not quite Helm, neither quite Kustomize. It uses those tools and it presents the results in a very unique way. It really adds value to complex deployments. But first, let's talk a little bit about the environment. We are using Killer Coda interactive environment. You can see we have a running cluster, the 1.29 version, and let's start by installing Kluctl. It's very easy to install, just curl and the binary will download and we'll have it available. Additionally, Kluctl comes with a web UI, which we will activate right now. Later in the video, we can explore how it looks. Let's go back to the terminal. The first thing you want to do when you work with Kluctl is to create a dedicated folder and a .kluctl YAML file. This file contains targets. You can think of targets as where you want your resources to be deployed. In our case, both of those targets point to the same Kubernetes context. Those can and typically are different Kubernetes clusters. We are also using a discriminator, which enables Kluctl to manage orphaned resources, as well as args, which is a special keyword through which we can interact with various YAML constructs and template our files. All right, we have dev and prod, and we set up our targets. Let's move to creating an actual resources. The first step of creating resources, which might be familiar to you if you used Kustomize before. If not, I am going to release soon very easy and quick Kustomize interactive workshop where you can familiarize yourself with the Kustomize concepts. But for now, it's enough to understand that Kustomize defines overlays through various files. So in our case, we define a path to a folder Redis and something which will apply all the labels to all the resources. So let's create deployment. And next we are going to deploy the actual Redis deployment and a service. In order to do this, we have to create a Redis folder. Let's change directory to this folder. We are creating another customization inside, which points to deployment YAML and service YAML, and also Redis deployment and Redis service. Let's check in the Taya editor if all the files are correctly created. And we have Kluctl YAML, we have deployment, service, customization, and deployment here. Great. Let's add here a YAML language server. So we have a little bit of nicer font. All right. Accept. Right. So that's typical YAML file. We're not going to look at length at the deployment and service. Those are just examples. Let's go back to the terminal. And now we are going to deploy those files with Kluctl. Notice that we didn't specify any templating. We're just using Kluctl almost as if a replacement for Kustomize. So let's quickly initiate a new Git project and commit everything and deploy our resources. Here I'm using --yes so that the demo flow is nicer, but in real life scenario, you would actually use it without the yes flag so that you can see and confirm whether you're happy with the changes. We have this warning that comes from the Go client, but it's just a warning, so we can ignore it. Right, so what happened? We have deployment YAML, Kluctl, deployment, Redis, customization, and service. So what happens when we change something in the deployment file? Let's imagine we are going to change the number of replicas. So I'm just using a simple YQ command line tool to overwrite replicas to 2. So we did it. We can see it in the editor. Go back real quick and see our deployments. And here we have replicas 2. All right. So now let's deploy again using the same command. We're deploying to the dev environment. And here you can see that Kluctl is giving us a very nice div. It says, hey, the path in your YAML from spec replicas changed from value 1 to value 2. Again, I automatically accepted it, but in a real life scenario, you would actually click yes to continue. One thing you might remember, we actually added common labels to every resource. So let's see if this worked. And we have our example Kluctl deployment project labels on our Redis card pod, which is great. All right, so let's look at a little bit more complicated scenario. So far, we just use a plain deployment, but the real power of Kluctl lies in templating. Kluctl uses Jinja 2 templating engine instead of traditional Go templating, which is a little bit more advanced and enables you to do a bit more fancy things. But for now, we are going to delete the previous deployment to make sure that we have a clean slate. We will also be able to migrate it, but for the sake of the demo, we're just going to remove it and start from scratch. One thing that we have to do first, we need to change the discriminator, because what we are going to do is we will deploy the same deployment to different namespaces. So the discriminator enables Kluctl to identify all the resources, and if we use the same discriminator, it will essentially overwrite, and Kluctl will not be able to identify resources that are deployed in different namespaces. So we're going to change this value. So discriminator is in the Kluctl YAML file. Let's check if it worked. And here we have a discriminator of a value Kluctl demo, target name, and environment that points to the environment name, which is dev or prod. All right, so in order to deploy those resources to different namespaces, we have to create a namespace. So we are going to create a namespace folder and modify the customization file to actually point to namespace as well as to Redis path. You notice here that I'm using the keyword barrier, which essentially tells Kluctl to first create all the resources from the path namespace, wait until they are applied, and then create the resources from the path Redis. So this helps in our case because we want to first create a namespace and only then be able to deploy our application. You see that we are also using override namespace keyword, meaning that if there are no namespaces specified in our files, which we didn't, so if you can look at the Redis deployment, there is just a name. There's no namespace specified here. Similarly with the service. If there are no namespaces specified, then Kluctl will override them using Kluctl demo and the environment name from args, which will result in Kluctl demo dev or Kluctl demo prod. All right, so let's change our deployment file. And also let's create a namespace resource in the namespace folder. Notice that the namespace resource will also be overridden by templating engine depending on what target we are deploying to. So now with all this in place, we should be able to deploy the same resources both to the dev namespace and to prod namespace, which will be Kluctl demo dev, Kluctl demo prod. Let's give it a try. So it tells us apply to objects. We've created a namespace Kluctl demo dev. We created a service and the deployment in this namespace. Let's do the same for prod. Again, same output. 3 additional remote objects were created. Kluctl demo prod namespace, and then both service and deployment within the Kluctl demo prod namespace were created as well. In order to see if this is really the case, let's list pods and services in both namespaces. And indeed, we have all the pods and services correctly applied in both namespaces. So that was it. That's a very brief introduction to Kluctl. There is a companion blog as well as this interactive scenario that will be linked in the video description, depending on how you'd like to consume the content. But otherwise, now we can explore the web UI. So within the web UI, we could see that there's various resources, projects and targets, and we can kind of see what happened here within the web UI. To be quite frank, I didn't experiment that much with web UI, so I don't see how this could be used, but there is a visual representation of what we just did from the command line. You can also use Octant, which comes predefined within the scenario. If you're not familiar with Octant, it's a cluster viewer where you can see all the resources, namespaces, and so on, and just explore them through web UI rather than through command line. If you want to learn more about Kluctl, you can join the Slack channel in the CNCF Slack or explore documentation, which is really good. I have seen a lot of documentations. This one is very nice and detailed. Guys that created Kluctl are really responsive, really nice. I had a great chat with the Kluctl creator, and I'm sure you have a lot of fun with this project. For now, that's all. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.